So, welcome to Coming to Your Senses, where we talk about navigating the labyrinth of the mind and emerging victorious. I'm really happy today that I am being joined by one of my friends and colleagues, Al Kenny. So, thank you for taking the time to be with us today, Al. I'm going to launch straight in with a question.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Where in your, knowing that this podcast is called Coming to Your Senses, where would you say, at what point in your life, or there may be many points in your life, have there been those moments where you've come to your senses? And what and where has that led you to?
I love the question. And I would imagine you're going to find this with everyone you ask the question to. You have a whole bunch of things that pop through your mind. But I'm going to go for one where I was going to say it was a moment that brought me to my senses and sent me in a whole different direction. And then I think we'll probably end up having a discussion where I would point to other moments where I'm like, oh, it not only brought me to my senses, but helped me realize what was actually happening, like what sat underneath it. Um, but like, my backstory, I was in the corporate world for a long time, and I was a leader in that world, and a bunch of stuff happened to me, but I would describe myself, and actually I was described as a tough love leader. I had a situation where I was told quite early on in my leadership career, you're the captain of your ship, and if you can't get your ship safely to harbor, then we'll have to find a different captain. So it was like kind of the choice was, so you need to be really clear. You've either got the right sailors or that are going to get you there, and if they're not the right sailors, then you got to find the right ones, or we've got to find a new captain. And and it had, at this point in my life, I'd become really focused on how I'm going to build a life I want. And so I got busy doing that, and I got really good at it. But I was at an event with an amazing guy called Dr. Chris Shambrook, who is a sports psychologist for British Olympic rowing. And it was a leadership event. And he, actually, only a few of us turned up. So we ended up having a Chatham House rules conversation. Like, let's just get together and really go deep. And in that conversation, I told him, I said, I get really pissed off with people. Like, people just really annoy me. And he was like, oh, why do you think that is? And I said, well, because most people, or a lot of the people in my team, don't seem to be as driven and as committed to themselves as I am to them. And I just don't get it. And he was like, oh, are you up for doing an exercise? To which I was. And we did a visualization exercise, and he got me to embody the last person that had made me feel that way. And, trying to, just to make a long story short, got me to get into their body. And, I can still remember, even just at the beginning of the process, going, oh, I don't like this. And he made me kind of think about that, be in their body from when they were at the desk, as they walked to the door, and then as they walked in. And what did they hear? What did I hear? What did I feel? What did I see? And the only thing I remember, well, the thing that I remember the most is that what I was feeling was abject fear, like a really deep fear. And then Chris just said to me, so who's the problem here? You or them? And I was like, oh my goodness, it's me. And that is the first time that I really had that insight of like, oh, I'm creating this. Whereas, I see it so much more profoundly now, because that triggered me going on a massive journey of personal exploration, which was, well, I don't want to be that, but I don't know how to be anything different. And so that changed the whole trajectory of my life in that moment, because from then on, I started to get really curious about, well, where does human performance, where does where does it all come from? Like, how do you tap into something? How do you tap into human potential if it's not by driving it in the way that I've been doing it? So that kind of was my major, oh dear, right, it's me. And yeah, like I say, got very curious from then on as to, well, what more is an offer if I keep looking in that direction?
There's two things that really jump out at me within that, which is around that it so often takes somebody else to reflect something back to us. We most of us are so blindsided to our own behaviors, patterns, routines, that we are not as aware as we could be. And so it takes, whether it's an exercise, whether it's a question, whether it's hearing somebody else's story, whether it's working with somebody one on one, that having that reflection point, it's like having a psychological slap around the face sometimes, for me anyway, of just that those moments that jar, to go, oh, hang on a second. Then the second part that follows on for that from me was that I get from that insight that something needs to happen differently. I just don't know how. And I think that for many people, in many aspects of life, that's a they get that something needs to be different, but because they don't know the how, they stop. So I'm curious as to what happened in that moment for you. For you had that realization that, okay, if it's not working the way I'm doing it, I need to do it differently, but I don't really know how. What kept you going, or where did that journey take you? I suppose, what were the next kind of things that you started to notice?
Yeah, I think the two things you touched on there are really important. And I think what kept me going, I'm gonna start there. Like, I still had clarity on, what I wanted to create for myself. And I really do believe in this. Like, I look back now and I can see all the times where I've had ideas, whether you want to call them ideas, dreams, visions, any of those things. You're like, that's what I would love. Like, that would be really cool. And that hadn't dissipated. So that was still clear. And I had this insight. So now it was like, okay, I don't know how, but I'm really interested in figuring it out, because now I it was like I had the both ends. It's like, well, I've got my vision, which at that point was, I used to talk about things and I'd say, I was in my early 30s then, and I used to talk about like 20s, 30s, 40s. And unfortunately, I'm closer to the end of that story now than I was back then. But
I'm beyond
I
it.
would
It's fine. Life after that's fine.
but I used to say, like 20s is all about position, position, position. And then 30s was prime time. And then 40s is like kind of fruits of your labor. And so, I had this thing in my mind around, wealth creation and, family and like lifestyle and all of those things, which were still just so real for me that I was like, well, I'm I'm not going to let go of that. I just have to. I just now been shown that there's an alternative path, and I guess maybe I'm going to move between my story and how have learned to see it, which is um, not knowing how is the most natural thing in the world. Like, how can you know how to do something you've never ever known to do before? Yet the trick of the mind is somehow that we fall into the idea that we should know, and that not knowing is a slight on us. And I, for whatever reason, I think I see through a lot of my life, like that's one of those things that I've not necessarily bought into a huge amount. So, like, not knowing doesn't really seem like a massive problem to me. Sometimes it slows me down. So it took me time, like even back then, I had that insight. Like, I didn't really do anything for the next straight away with it, other than like, just wallow in probably a little bit of self-pity, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm doing this, and gosh. And I had another instance, which was just like kind of hammer it home, where I was trying to hire someone, and they took a reference on me, and the reference they got back was, "Oh, if you join Alan's team, you'll be successful, but be aware if you ever fall down, he's just as likely to step over you as he is to pick you up if he doesn't think that it's going to be of service to him getting where he needs to go." And I had to be with that, really be with that, and ask myself, was that true? And I was like, oh, damn, that's probably true. And that was when I was like, right, okay. And the first thing I did was just got really curious. I got really curious. Like I got curious with Chris, who had done that. I was like, I need to know more about this. Like, help me see more. And so I would say a lot of what kept me going was finding people, finding guides that could point me in interesting directions. Um, and, you know, over that, what was the following 8 years, like I just saw a hell of a lot more, and I changed. And I've got people who are very close to me that can kind of go back and they're like, well, you were this, and then you were this, and then you were this. And they're like, it was like three different, completely different versions of you as you kind of saw things new and fresh.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I love what you said there about the expectation that we have that we should know, but how can we know if we've never done something before? And that it is a perfect opportunity to then start looking for those teachers, coaches, mentors, guides, books, resources, whatever it may be, to be able to point us in another direction. And I think the key factor in my experience of having you in my life is you have a strong propensity towards curiosity. And it seems to me that that curiosity within you is genuine as to what else, how else can I look at this, or how else can I see this. And when so what I'm curious about is when you have got when you're looking for those and asking those people different questions and looking for those resources and those pointers, what is it that helps you navigate the possible of a number of different options to know which is the right way forward for you?
Hmm. Well, I think what I have come to see, and at least this is how it looks to me, that I believe I have an inbuilt GPS system. Like I don't know where it comes from. If someone asked me to explain what it is, I would probably describe it as like the wisdom of the universe. And I think it exists in all of us. And I kind of want to do a little bit of before and after, because I look back, I see that it's always been with me. Like I left Ireland at the drop of a hat. I still remember coming to England with just quilt and pillows and a stereo. Such a typical Irish boy. Like I got my quilt and I got my pillows and I got my stereo, and landing in the UK, and I knew
How
where
old were you then?
I was 21,
Okay.
but I just knew I was going to go. I was like, oh, bang, and and it all worked out. And I've got so many examples that I look back on and go, I don't even know how I knew, but I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do next. Um, I did spend a lot of time, like over to my front right hand side of me here. There's a bookcase full of books, because for quite a while, I was deeply curious, but I thought there was a right way. And so for a long time, I was looking for the right way that was going to make me kind of whole and complete, and it was going to take me to the point where I would know, and then that would be great, because then I would be more at peace. What I've come to see since then, and I guess a mentor of mine, Michael Neal, listening to his book the first time, The Inside Out Revolution, was kind of when a massive penny drop moment was like, whoa, no, it's inside of me. And so now when I think about curiosity, I think about, I can go and ask anyone anything, I can read anything, I can watch anything, and then I can just be really curious about what shows up in me. So I'm not going to read a book, or I'm not going to listen and you and I have some amazing conversations and you point to some incredible places for me, some of which I might be like, oh yeah, that's interesting, but it's not for me. And then other times I'm like, whoa, gosh, that feels really compelling for me. And I know that it's not you that's making me feel that. I'm like, that's something that I feel. So it means that I've seen something and I'm been drawn in a particular direction. And what I've learned is that that's the thing to follow as best I can, is that. So I would say there's almost two levels of curiosity that I think about. One is just, oh, that looks interesting. Oh, they sound like they've got something interesting to say or valuable, or and so being just curious to go to follow your nose. Like, oh, does it pass the sniff test? Yes, it does. That looks interesting to go. And then get really curious about what shows up inside of you and trust that. Oh, because that'll tell you where to go next. And, there's no right way to go next. There's no wrong way. There's just where you're going to go next. And then you'll see more. And so I guess, yeah, like life for me is a game of curiosity. And it is a game. It's a game that we get to find out lots of stuff as we go. It's just that we probably have a bit of a misunderstanding of the game of life as we are taught it growing up and conditioned to believe it.
I think that goes to your point about looking for a right way, because I think that as very small beings, we are. I know it's a common uh, uh, cliche that's spoken about, but we see those big people walking around on those leg things, and they can reach stuff and we can't. So we want to copy them and we want to do that. So we find out, well, what's the rules of walking? And we might look at them and try to mimic the way that they're doing, but ultimately we're going to fall over until we find our balance, until we find our way of doing it. But it's great to have that. Oh, that's a possibility. And I think that right the way through until we hit our I think around about 7, but sometime between 7 and 10, we maintain that kind of like, ooh, there's something there that I can do, or I'm going to have a play around with, and we have this far more of a freedom and an exploration. But then for some reason, as we get, and I have my theories, but as we get older, we seem to look to the external world more and more for what are the rules. So whether that's with our peers, whether that's family, whether that's school, whether that's the wider world, we look for those rules. And I think, and I'd love to hear your views on this. For me personally, I think that's something that's tripped me up for many decades. Because when I've looked for the right way, I've then ignored that inner GPS, as you referred to it, because to me that inner GPS can often be completely contrary to what's perceived as the right way by the external world. So what are your thoughts in that?
Well, I think your point. So first of all, I think you're pointing to the probably one of the biggest challenges for us as human beings is the fact that we are both deeply connected and highly social as a species. Like we are social beings, and we want to be connected, and we value that. And we all have a unique path to walk, and sometimes those two things can seem in conflict with each other. And like I am someone that gets caught up in the idea of other people's opinions and wanting to know I'm doing a good job as much as the next person. Like I think that again has become totally normal. And the bit that keeps us trapped is the idea that there is a right way, and that will mean that everyone is going to like us and everyone's going to approve. And and what stops us following our path is fear. Like fear, it always comes back down in my mind to fear. Like the fear of the unknown. Well, if I do that, like how will my partner, my kids, my colleagues respond? And fundamentally, the answer is you don't know. They'll respond how they'll respond. Like the world's going to respond how it responds. And what you know is that they're going to respond differently. Someone said, if I do this, will people like me? It's like, yes, maybe. Will some people not like it? Yes, maybe. Will some people not care? Yeah, maybe. Will it work? Yes, maybe. Will it not work out? Yes, maybe. It's the answer is everything. Now, but if you don't play, then nothing happens. And you know, if someone said to me, "What is the greatest opportunity that exists for me and for everyone else?" It is just going back and playing that game over and over again. Like, it's fine to get scared and then go back again and play some more, because and I think this expression gets thrown around sometimes, and I think you and I have talked about it a few times. People will say, just be yourself. And I want to take the just away from that. I'm like, no, being yourself is the best game in town, and sometimes it is the most challenging game in town, because you've got to be with your truth and be with yourself, and walk your path, knowing that, yeah, the world will show up in all sorts of ways as a reaction to it, and you can still walk your path. um, but it's, like I said, I think it's the greatest opportunity available to us all.
It's interesting that one of the conversations I've had a lot over the last few weeks actually is with a couple of businesses, and they've used this turn of phrase, not me, about bringing your whole self to work. And I think there's a certain number of what I think is management speak that if my internal organs all kind of crunch up on the inside, it's like nothing about that feels comfortable. And I don't mean that in an easy way. It's just it sounds like it's been prescribed, and it's the next thing that we need to be looking at, rather than actually how to do that. And I had a client this week who was saying, I keep being told I need to bring my whole self to work, but I don't want to bloody bring my whole self to work. And we had this really fascinating conversation around, well, what does that actually mean? What do you think they're asking for? And what are their expectations versus what do you think those expectations are? And I think the majority of us also don't actually know who we really are. I think there's so many different conflicting pieces of information that we've taken on board as to who am I, and there's a multitude of roles that we think that we're trying to fulfill. So we're constantly flim-flamming, technical term, between all of those different things. So it's a real challenge to know who am I meant to be bringing up and how am I meant to be showing up. And I think that a big part of being able to connect to that inner guidance, that inner GPS, and being authentic is about relaxing. And the switch that I hear, even from when I first met you, so to bring the listeners in on our first interaction, you've already mentioned Michael Neal. So Al and I met on a course, and we were put into a breakout room together and doing a particular exercise where um, we offered solutions. So the one person would put up, I think there were 3 or 4 of us in the room. One of us will put up the problem that we're experiencing and we'd like some guidance on. And then the rest of us would pretend that person's not in the room and then say, well, if I was them, I would. Or if I was their coach, I would. And I said something that sparked something in you in quite a significant way, I think. And interestingly enough, that was me being me. I wasn't looking to be liked. I wasn't looking to make sure that we stay friends and get to the point that we are now. It was an honest invitation to play the game in a different way. And I think that sometimes when we are offered that, it can be really uncomfortable. And I'd love to hear your viewpoint, not necessarily on that exercise that we did, but just how do you navigate the invitation to play by different rules and the discomfort that that brings up?
Yeah, no, you scared me half to death, I think would have been my turn of phrase for what I experienced then. Um, Another person who is has been a great guide for me in the same way that you've been, has I don't know where the expression comes from, but like, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. And I love it and hate it. because I know the truth. There's a deep truth in it for me now. So, um, so like I'm trying to just connect back to your question, but yeah, when I think about that, and someone shows up and they say something or they point in something, and if I don't like it or I get scared, well, first of all, the illusion is that they might be wrong, or like that they're causing me to feel that. And so like I can notice that I do that all the time. I'll be like, well, I'll try and run down what they say, or I'll be like, no, 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 I'll resist it and I don't buy into it. When I'm most present to myself, and like, oh, that's caused something in me. Like I can still remember, not exactly what it was you said, because you and I have slightly different versions of it, but it's the same. It's the same. It's the version of the same thing. And it was something along the lines of, I would get you to go and talk to strangers on, you know, on the corner of wherever, something along those lines. And I was like, oh God, I wouldn't want anything to do with that. Like that sounds horrendous. And then, but there's a deeper part of me that knew, like, oh yeah, you got to run away from that, because there it is. Like, there's the opportunity to work through the thing that you want to work through. But if I had been really honest, what I probably would have said at that time, what I'm looking for is a magic pill that means I can just take it, so that I won't feel the way that I feel, and I can have what I would love to have. And that's just not on offer. So I guess for myself, and again, if someone says, well, do you think you'll ever get over this? I'm like, no, because becoming fearful about certain things or coming up against your edge is part of living. And sometimes that edge comes from just yourself, nudging up against your boundaries. Sometimes someone points at something and you suddenly have an edge that comes crashing into view. And the question becomes, what do you do in that moment? And I heard a great expression this week, which was, to become great at anything, you have to draw your attention to the present moment as best you can. To become great at anything, you must direct your attention to the present moment. And I love that, because then it's like I don't have to worry about so much. So it's like, oh, I'm feeling fear right now. And it's nothing to do with anything other than this moment. It's like, oh, what's here for me right now? And we underestimate what's available. And I include myself, we underestimate what's available to us in the present moment. And if you don't, do you mind if I just dive into that kind of? There was something when you talked about that example about bring your whole self that I
Yeah,
feel
go for it.
compelled to talk about. I would have said things like that: bring your whole selves to work. And then someone might show up and say, I feel really unmotivated today. And I'm like, and the old me would have been like, I didn't mean that whole self. I meant like the whole super
Yeah,
motivated, like bring your whole. But when we really say things like that, it's interesting, because there's no such thing as your whole self. Like, not a fixed version of it, at least. There's just bring your whole self to this moment as best you can.
I
And that can
remember
look
years
like
ago.
something, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's
I
all right.
remember years ago I did I think it was called the Experience Week up at Findhorn in Scotland, which is a community, and then they offer courses and things. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. So this was back in, I think, 2003, so quite a while back. And whilst you're there, you do service. So you work in an area, the garden, the kitchen, you look after the chambermaiding, I suppose. And I was working in the garden, and every morning, all of us that were working in the garden we'd stand in a circle, and the person that was in charge would say, "Where are you at right now? And what would you like right now?" And I remember one day just saying, "Do you know what? I feel so calm. I'd just like to sit in a tree and watch the world go by." And when it came round to dishing out the jobs and who would like to do what, he said to me, "I've got the perfect tree for you." And I genuinely thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He took me to a tree And he said, sit in there as long as you want. If you want to prune, then these trees need pruning. I'll leave the tools there. And that was the first point in my life that I'd realized that stuff still got done, but he didn't try and change where I was at. He didn't make what I'd said wrong. And it was absolutely okay for me in that moment, as uncomfortable as I was then, to be given the permission to sit in the tree. But that's, to me, what I'm hearing you say is, where are you at right now? What have you got right now? What energy do you have right now? What is that, the whole self in this moment, that you can bring, that's going to be an input into this conversation, this project, whatever it may be, rather than thinking all these different components that we need to bring in and be that highly motivated, driven type A person all the time.
Yeah, like I think it's a powerful story. It's a powerful story because it's empowering people as well. You know, I was on a call last night, a group call, and without going into the detail of the story, but there was a person talking about how they gave someone a hug sometime, and then someone said, "Oh, that was arrogant of you to do that," and it was because they hadn't asked the person what they needed in that moment. And I heard that last night. I was like, "Whoa, that's so powerful." You know, when we really trust that everyone has got everything that they need for themselves, well, then that question takes on a whole different ballgame. Oh, like, where are you at right now? And what do you need relative to your world? You know, whether you're a leader, whether you're a parent, you know, a friend, um, in whatever capacity, that is a real gift, and it's also the one that we're challenged to bring to people so often, because we get so attached to our idea of what they should want or what they should need, and like that's the trick of the mind. Like, oh well, I know best. Versus, hey, where are you at right now? Or how beautiful! Like, oh, I just feel like I could sit in a tree and watch the world go by. Brilliant, we've got the perfect tree because that was what was true for you. And what an opportunity for us. Like, there's where peace of mind, people go, where does peace of mind live? Like, a big chunk of it is in letting go of the idea that anyone needs to be anywhere other than where they're at, including yourself. Then we can get,
And how infrequently we give ourselves that.
absolutely, you know, because we're all very enamored with there, you know, well, we got to get
I'm getting
there.
there. I'm getting there. I'm getting
Yeah,
there.
yeah. You
What's
know,
wrong
what
with
would you?
here?
Yeah, and then there's nothing wrong with the idea of something different, but different is not the same as better. Like, there, the trick of the mind is that there is going to be better than here. And it's like, you know, when we came back to that guidance thing, you know, your inner GPS, it is not guiding you to a better place. It's just guiding you in the direction that's your direction. And you're following it, whether you like it or not, you're actually following it. But I think letting go of the idea of better is a huge opportunity. You know, that was my story. You know, like, if I look back, when I say, you know, that first insight that I had, I was still on the hunt for better. And so for me, it was, I want to make money and I want to clear out mortgage and I want to be able to then spend time going on holidays, and because that's going to be better than this. And and that became hugely taxing because, you know, there was a lot riding now on there's a lot riding on the moments, a lot riding on this moment, because the rest of my life was on the line. And if I don't get there, then what does that mean? And I think, what, you know, one of the things that I've come to see, and it keeps getting kind of gifted to me through a variety of things, is that there's no such thing as there. There's no place that's going to be better. It will be different. And, you know, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have an array of experiences, like some exhilarating, mind blowing experiences, and also some heartbreaking experiences. But that's just what's on offer. It's just like no matter where you are, both of those are on offer. And coming back to, the peace of mind thing, peace of mind is becoming okay with all of that, which is which we don't really want to do, because the trick of the mind is that there is a place that we could be where we don't have to experience any of the heartbreak or the challenge. And it's like, no, that's just everywhere. Whether you're, I don't know, Richard Branson, or the man sat on the side of the road, looking for someone to put some money in his cup. It's all available to us all the time.
We're sold the illusion of comfort, we're sold the illusion of easy and happy. And if I just get, then I will be. Rather than what I loved about what you were saying there is that the GPS isn't guiding you to better, it's guiding you to next. And for me, that's the next bit that's going to help me evolve, help you evolve. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy or comfortable or joyous or exciting. It may well be. And it's just the next bit before the next bit comes along. That's all it is, which means it's only ever here. So to wrap this up, because I know what you and I are like, we could keep talking for at least another 4 or 5 hours. I'd love to know if there are any specific habits or practices that help you navigate through life's chaos, that help you connect more to that GPS and bring that clarity for you.
Yeah. So there's two that I guess I would probably point to. One is just super, well, they're both actually super practical and quite easy, actually. One practice that I would say I've become really more dialed into in the last 12 months, but see it has been so powerful, is the practice of journaling daily. And I journal daily on a few. Well, I say daily, but I'm a pretty good. I'm a solid 6 out of 7 days most weeks. That I'm not religious about having to be perfect with it. But what I find is that I journal every day to get clean and clear inside myself. So as best I can show up to this day, um, because this is the one we've got. And so I journal with wins, gratitude, and praise of the last 24 hours. So what have been my
So is that
wins?
something you do first thing in the morning then?
I'll get up and I'll do a few bits. Like I tend to walk the dog and I'll do some exercise, and then I sit down to do it. So, and it takes me about 15 minutes max, and I reflect. So I do wins, praise, gratitude. What are the wins? There's always been wins. Just again, learning to scan for the upsides, and they're just practical stuff. Like sometimes it's a win is I had a really good laugh with one of my kids, or and other times it's you win a customer, or but it's anything, just the thing you scan your day for. What's the wins? um what am I grateful for? Which again, and there's no number to this, 2, 3, but and probably the one of the most powerful ones is praise, and that is praising myself. It sounds like what, stroking your ego? It's like no, no, no. Learning to love yourself fully, like the light side and the dark side. So I'll say things like, I love how I can care so much that I will be angry with my kids, or I love how sometimes, no matter how angry my kids are, I can just love them to pieces. And they're just two sides of the same coin. Like I love how much I care that sometimes I show up as angry. But by learning to love the dark and the light side, we can learn to love all of ourselves. When we say, love yourself, be yourself, you got to love your whole self. There's no perfect you. Like we are these perfectly imperfect beings. And just by doing that practice, let's just say I have been, I don't know where you're going with language in this podcast, Jules, but let's just say I have been a bit of a dick. I can be like, I love how sometimes I'm a bit of a dick, and I can see where that comes from. So I do that. Then I have a daily declarations, which are my kind of I am statements, just creating myself. I am good, I'm free, I'm ready for anything, I'm wisdom guided. I've got a whole just set of my personal declarations. And then the final thing I do is just reflections. I said just reflections. It's the reason I say is it can be anything. And uh, sometimes they're not very profound. They're just like, oh, yeah, okay, that's what's alive in me now. And other times they literally blow my mind where I'm like, oh, like I said to you today, one of the things that's popped up today is, oh, focus on the things you care about the most. You're drifting. And as I did that, I was like, that's true. I am. And then got more focused than I've been in a while. So I do that. So that's one practice. And then the other practice, I have my best mate, Billows. He's also my podcast host. And I have the likes of yourself. I have got people that I am in conversation with consistently, um, in pursuit of kind of the same thing, like the kind of, I don't know, the deepest possibilities of life. Now that's who those people are for me. But the thing that I would point to is I think anyone can have any version of that. Like their, um, I've heard it called like their trust council, their, you know, but it's the very specific people that I am proactive in maintaining a dialogue around that I'm interested in, they're interested in, and so I can be off base, and I have been, and you've seen me, and I can have a conversation with you, and it grounds me back down, or with Billows. And I think as a practice, it's great to know where are those people that just by being in conversation with them, just by being connected with them, they're going to bring you back to yourself. They for whatever reason, like that is part of the grounding process. And that's hugely valuable to know. And so it's it's a great practice to be in, to know who those people are, and to proactively make it your business to be in dialogue with them and conversation, and connection, because it serves you.
I think that latter part is so been such a game changer for me over the last few years of finding those people, and still in the practice of finding those people, because I think that it can be very easy in this digital world to become quite isolated, and also be very busy, whether that's with work, whether that's with social life or home life or whatever it may be. But having those regular times put in to just have that, whether it's ideas being bounced around or being able to be with how you are in that moment and seeing what, I mean, you and I've had conversations where I've ended up in tears, and yet the conversation that's come the other direction from you and the other guys on the call has given me a different perspective on something. So having that trust council, I think, is so powerful. um, and again, something I think that isn't widely spoken about, and not something that everyone has. And the proactive nature of looking for that and actually making sure that it's there and showing up to it as well, whatever that is, however you are showing up that day.
Yeah, and it probably comes full circle onto your opening question to me. It's like you can't see what you can't see. And but when you know that you're creating everything, then all it takes is a glance in a direction that someone points to that you've not looked before, and your whole world can change in a heartbeat. And and that's why I love those conversations, because I genuinely don't know what I'm going to see. I don't always have to see, but just by being open to the possibility that there is something, then it means I'm prepared to look. And if someone said, what would be a great practice, and I've never really thought about that, I'd be like, be prepared to look in alternative directions to the ones you normally do. Like, even if, particularly to the ones that you feel the most resistance to, kind of just as best we can be, oh, okay, let me just take a look, because there might be something there for me. Um, and then who knows? Who knows where those might lead? They don't have to lead anywhere, but they might lead somewhere just more, someplace interesting, and who knows?
Exactly. And I think that's a perfect place to conclude the conversation, Al. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your story. We will put in the show notes your link to your website as well as your podcast so that people can find out more about you. But thank you so much for your time.
Oh, no, it's been a pleasure.